Welcome to Dhamma Talk program, which is this is the first step that we have to issue in the June and also in the next months to come. So that's why today we are very happy to have the experienced Buddhist Westerners with us. Especially he has experience about spiritual, we call spiritual journey for long, so more than 40 years. So today we have to exchange our experience with the Upashaka Yasha. So that's why I would like him to say something or introduce himself with the audience. So please, Upashaka.
Sawadee Krap, thank you for having me as your guest.
Yeah.
Actually, my Buddhist experiences started 56 years ago when I had a vision of a Buddhist temple in a small little town in Northern California.
In Northern California.
Yes. And 4 years later, when I got my driver's license, I went back to the same place and had the same vision.
Oh.
But this time I drove up to the wall.
Yeah.
It was a wall with a stupa behind it.
Oh, stupa. At that time in the States, there was some stupa?
No, there wasn't.
No. Oh.
No. Well, I didn't find that out for 40 years.
Oh.
But it had a very stylized stupa behind the wall.
Oh, I see.
And when I went there when I was 16 years old, I drove up to the wall, and on the wall was a small plaque that said, "This is the oldest continuous Buddhist temple."
Yeah.
That's all it said. Personally, I was surprised to think that a temple in Sebastopol, California would be the oldest Buddhist temple in the United States or California.
Yeah.
I would think Los Angeles or San Francisco.
Yeah.
Well, 40 years later, I had an opportunity to go back to the same place. And I went with my friend, my school friend, Marcus Folk. And he was a member of that Sangha.
Yeah.
And he took me back and with him and his wife took me back to the same place.
Right.
And when we drove up, no wall, no stupa.
Oh.
Oh, I was so disappointed. We asked the sensei what happened to the wall and the stupa. And the sensei said, there never was a wall or a stupa. That was a very strange moment in my life.
At that time?
Yes, that was about 20 years ago.
Oh, about 20 years.
Now, I've helped Tibetans build stupas, and the style of stupa in Thailand is slightly different. And I went to Sri Lanka.
Yep, what's about that in Sri Lanka?
In Sri Lanka, a year ago, I went to Sri Lanka, and the second day I was in Sri Lanka, I saw the exact stupa that I saw in my vision when I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
So it took 56 years for me to figure out what the sign actually meant. It was the oldest Buddhist temple ever anywhere. And it was in Sri Lanka, and it took me 56 years to find out.
Yeah.
Really pretty odd for a Westerner to have that kind of durability and endurance in visualization as a process.
Yeah. So that's your first experience about Buddhism?
That was my first experience, yes. In college, I was just graduating with degrees in physics and math. And my advisors asked me if I wanted to continue on to get a master's degree. And he asked me to present a master's thesis. And my master's thesis was, where do solutions to problems come from?
Interesting.
Well, for example, the Buddha looked for the solution to a problem in his kingdom, in his castle, and it wasn't there. And he looked for that in the 6 years of his sadhu practices.
Yeah.
And then he went another place.
Right.
And he had to go to another place in order to find the solution. to his problem. And so my question is, where do those solutions reside before we notice them?
Yep.
Is there a place for that?
Right.
Well, my professor went to this bookshelf right behind his desk and pulled out a book of letters by Albert Einstein.
Oh, Albert Einstein, the famous scientist.
The famous scientist. It turned out he wrote a letter, in a letter to one of his colleagues, almost exactly 50 years before I asked the question.
Right.
And his comment on where do solutions to problems come from, he said, it's not physics.
Not physics, but
it's metaphysics.
It's metaphysics.
I had to look up metaphysics at the time, by the way. I didn't know what metaphysics was.
Oh, at that, okay.
And then he suggested I study an esoteric tradition recommending Buddhism.
Esoteric Buddhism.
By the way, I had to look up esoteric at the time.
Oh,
So his recommendation that I study an esoteric Buddhist tradition. This was in 1970.
1970.
In 1969, about halfway through that year, a Tibetan Lama moved to Berkeley, California.
Right, at that time.
About 60 miles away. And I decided to go ahead and pursue my master's thesis among the recommendation of Albert Einstein, which I thought was a pretty good recommendation.
Right.
It turned out that Albert Einstein turned out to be absolutely correct in every way about his recommendation. And how inspiring that would be to a young person in 1970 exploring esoteric metaphysical domains and understanding that Einstein somehow had known about this 50 years before.
Right.
Truly an inspiring connection. I spent 10 years with the Tibetans.
Tibetan Lama.
Tibetan Lamas. And we traveled again all over the place. And I passed certain tests in relationship to their yogis.
The yogi, one who practice yoga or meditation.
Well, they in the Mahayana tradition explains their training in yogic terms.
Yeah.
You have Ati Yoga, Ani Yoga, and Kriya Yoga.
Yeah, Kriya Yoga.
They're really they're chanting, visualizations, and sitting.
Sitting, I see.
And
devotion of some kind.
Well, there's sitting, standing, and walking.
Yep.
And then there's other postures to get you involved in those in a very dramatic way. The postures are very hard to do.
Yeah, for the beginner, very hard. Even Theravada tradition, like I myself, when I was a young novice, very difficult to practice meditation, especially sitting meditation for a long, maybe for hours, very hard. But if we pass through that, I think we can, accumulate our experience and we can do well in another step, understand more about the deeper phenomena, especially mental phenomena. I think that's a good experience like you to have this kind of experience.
Well, the first puja that I went to
was about puja
ceremony, Tibetan ceremony. I had to sit in a lotus posture. Well, of course my legs weren't right at all, and I had to push my arms down, and I actually rolled off the pillow onto my side before I was able to stabilize myself in the posture.
I'm sorry. I heard that it's quite difficult for Westerners to practice sitting meditation to sit lotus position, right?
It's not a position that they're used to sitting in at all, not culturally or socially.
Not culture, right? That's
they don't bend that way.
Yeah. Don't sit that way. I see.
But eventually you do.
Eventually, yeah.
And
we get used to it.
You sit there long enough.
Little by little practice. Great. Well, so next, what about your experience more when you get more accumulate your experience?
Well, partly in the Mahayana tradition, there's a big emphasis on debate and
Oh,
discussion.
debate, discussion. But
And-
actually in Theravada we have not much debate or discussion. But interesting. Please tell us about what is debate or discussion.
Well, debate is essentially testing or practicing what you know about your own meditation.
Yeah,
And you do this with 8 or 9 other folks.
right.
And you simply, the Lama asks you a question and you have to answer the question in the best possible way. And then you're open to criticism about that, how you manage that particular information.
Right.
And even though it's very many times humiliating and difficult,
Yeah.
it's a marvelous way of getting you to pay attention. It's when someone else is talking, your mind is relaxed and it's easy and big. But when you have to answer a question in front of 10 people, your mind gets just really, really teeny. You have a very difficult time
Yeah.
even finding words.
Yeah.
And so that is a marvelous practice on watching your mind go from comfortable large and understanding the answers to something very teeny and under a lot of pressure. And this is a way of appreciating that sometimes you have to come up with very precise and very specific answers to their questions. And it's excellent practice and something actually I rather miss because talking and sharing your experiences
Right.
with others is a very wholesome thing to do, and I think it's what the Buddha actually did.
I absolutely agree with you, Jim. Because in Theravada tradition we have this word, very famous word, we call the Dhamma Sakaccha. It means a kind of Dhamma discussion. It's a timely Dhamma discussion. It's believed that it can be the greatest blessing. But in the later, the Theravada, they don't much appreciate this kind of as you mentioned about discussion or debate. But actually in the Buddha time, which we believe is Tipitaka is our center of the reference. That's why we appreciate the Buddha teaching, a kind of discussion, as you mentioned. Yeah, I think it's quite similar between, as you mentioned about Mahayana or Vajrayana tradition and even the Theravada tradition, the early Buddhism, right? Okay.
Well, certainly the didactic or the dialectic or the
Dialectic,
Socratic method is questioning what you actually know yourself.
Yeah.
And it turns out that people know all sorts of things about you that you've never imagined. You feel as if many times that you're alone and nobody's paying attention. But when you get into these debates, it turns out that they all know all sorts of things about you, especially when you try to answer very difficult questions.
Right.
And it turns out they're excellent critics insofar as questioning whether you are being honest yourself with yourself.
Right.
And that is extremely difficult thing to do. And you actually can't edit your own dialogue in your mind. One of the comments is, don't believe everything you think. And so editing your own dialogue is really impossible. So you absolutely have to have that Socratic dialogue and feedback from others to evaluate your own participation in the meditational practices.
Yeah, that's even in Theravada tradition we have this kind of evaluation. We call the Vimamsa. In Pali term, Vimamsa we start with the Shanta, Viriya, and Citta, and Vimamsa. Vimamsa investigation. That's as you mentioned. That's is quite close to each other. So Jim, next I would like you to tell us about your symbolism. Especially your study. You have experience in Theravada, in Mahayana. Mahayana, or even we call Vajrayana tradition. So I heard that the Vajrayana tradition, they quite appreciate the symbolic representation of whatever the painting, the picture, the material things, to convey the Dhamma, which is the abstract, right, and immaterial. That's why I see the things in front of you. What you want to show us with this? I think that's maybe this idea from the Vajrayana or Mahayana tradition, right?
Well, how the tradition is actually applied goes something like this. In any temple, you have pictures of the Buddha or the story or whatever. And you'd be walking through the temple with the Lama, and he would notice you looking at a picture.
Right.
And he would say, "Oh," and he says, "Where are you in the picture?" Of course, when you're a new novice, you say, "Well, I must be in the picture." Therefore, you point to some place in the picture. I think I'm there. And he says, "Okay, good. How do you get out of there?" It's not getting in. Getting in is easy.
Yeah.
How do you get out of where you've gotten into?
Okay.
So it's really more of an exit strategy in your problems. For example, getting into college is a lot easier than getting out. Getting into a relationship is a lot easier than dealing with a relationship.
Yeah.
Life is easier to get into than getting out.
Getting out. Difficult.
So the real practice is, how do you get out of your choices? And as we go through the temple, these particular questions get more and more difficult, of course, until you say, when the Lama asks you, "Are you in your picture? Are you in this picture?" You go, "No, I don't. I'm not in the picture."
Okay, please preview your map. Maybe in the second time we can show in details about what is about the map that we call maybe spiritual map, right?
Well, it's a journey. It's essentially a map of your journey through your spiritual choices.
Okay.
And
interesting, eh?
Well, it turns out it's very, very old. In fact, this whole idea of mystical journey may be 10,000 years or longer old. In the early Egyptian period, there's a convincing argument that they had what's called the duat, the circle of the pilgrimage between here and there. And that may be at least 10,500 years old.
Yep.
The Hopis and other Aboriginal people who supposedly went to Australia 50,000 years ago actually took some of these ideas with them.
Yep.
It's easy to decide that these are coincidence. I think it's just as convincing to say that, in fact, this information was available 20,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, and that we walked around a lot on this planet. We just didn't settle down in our village and decide, that this was the end of the planet. We actually walked all over the place.
Yeah.
And we keep thinking that we didn't do that.
Right.
In fact, we've been doing it our whole history. And as people travel from one place to the other, as the Buddha did, he went from one place to the other talking to people about what they knew. And my problem here with this map is not my relationship with the teachers or even my relationship with the teachings, but it was, how do I explain my experience to inexperienced people? And it turns out that what the Buddha taught was one thing, and then you have tradition.
Yeah, tradition.
And traditions take Buddha's teachings and work it in different ways to help explain to the people they have to talk to.
Right.
It's basically diversity in the Dharma teachings.
Diversity.
And I think that diversity is inherent in the teachings and should be expected. You should have 250 schools of Buddha Dharma, explaining the Dharma in 250 different ways.
Yeah.
Because people approach this whole process in so many different ways.
Right.
So what I did is I chose to simplify. This is the wheel of life here.
Wheel of life. Yes. We start with the wheel of life. So I hope the audience, you are watching now to see closer the whole map, right, Jim?
Oh.
Yeah, the whole map to see. We start.
Well, we start in the center of the wheel of life.
Yeah.
And you...
First of all, I would like
Yes.
you to just only previews
Right.
what it is one for the first page and the second one like this, and because we quite have fixed time, maybe next we can have
right.
in detail step by step, okay?
This first part is the conditions. Buddha says not cause and effect, but cause and conditions.
Right.
And what this Bhava Chakra actually describes to people are the conditions you're working under.
So next.
The tree of life here, the Bodhi tree, basically with its branches, help with the explanation of the pilgrimage itself.
Yeah.
But between that,
Yeah. Then.
you have a wall here. Now the wall separates the difference between basically lay people and spiritual people. And every once in a while you hit this wall, mostly with your face,
Yeah.
and you bump into something and you go, what is that? And the question is how do you get on the other side? Certainly taking vows and studying Buddhist traditions gets you through the doorway here
Yeah.
into the clarity issues.
Yeah.
Now it turns out the rules change from one side to the other.
Yeah. So we have more 3 minutes.
3
For
minutes.
this, yes. So that's why I would like to conclude. So next times we will show you about how the audience can understand more about the map, the picture show us the spiritual journey or the journey to the spirituality, right? So that's why Jim, or another name, his name is Yasha, Upasaka Yasha, would like to explain more in detail. So next we start with maybe with the Power Chakra or dependent origination. So that is the highlight or main teaching of Buddhism. So this is representing through the picture that make the audience more easier to understand the teaching of the Buddha, which quite delicate or subtle one. Next, maybe we can show the audience how they can, live their life, through the Bodhi tree, right, Jim? Yes. So, and also, I think it's for this one, the land of clarity is interesting, and this next one to show you. So, Jim, interesting, very interesting. I'm very happy. I'm very happy to see this for the next show. I think it's we have a good opportunity, to share Dhamma with the Westerner, as the Easterner, or even we call Thai Buddhists, which quite, have their own tradition, which we practice Theravada tradition. We can widen our outlooks, to horizon of the knowledge of Buddhism, through the Western Buddhists like Upasaka Yasha, which for the end of the show, which could you conclude for about 1 minute to the audience, say something?
It's been a wonderful pilgrimage from my 12-year-old vision to this moment with Venerable Simphan, and how he has recognized and appreciated a very early and new Dharma as it is being introduced to the West, which is really fresh and new and very exciting insofar as it doesn't have a history, it doesn't have a tradition.
Yeah.
It just has newness and excitement and vitality. And I think the West can actually help revitalize some of these earlier ideas and to express them in the simplest possible way, because that's the only way they understand it.
Yep. Yep.
But it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean it's exactly simple, but it's simpler.
Simple. Thank you very much for this time. Next time we will have the our show same time, same place. So if you have any question or any comments about our show, so please call and please email to us through this address. So thank you very much for your watching. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you very much. And Buddha Dhamma Sangha, the Tribute Gem, bless you. Thank you very much. See you next time.